Hello, and thank you for joining me today here virtually at Reiman Gardens. Today I'm going to talk to you about creating butterfly havens, the power of planting, and citizen science. So let's get started. So let's talk about our butterflies. So in Iowa, roughly we have about 110 species of butterflies. Now, if you would ask me a year ago how many butterflies would we have in the state, I would have said something along the lines of 120 species. Depending on what list and what they're looking at and when something was last seen, we've actually taken some individuals off. However, we've also added some individuals back on because some species that we would have considered more transient from southern locations that only rarely fly north, we're starting to see more often, and now we're starting to count them as part of what we would consider an Iowa native individual. So 110 species of butterflies. Of those 110, though, some of our butterflies aren't doing so great. Now, we actually have currently 2 federally listed species here in the state. The Dakota skipper and the Poweshiek skipperling are 2 federally listed species. On top of the federal listing, there is actually a state listing. And the state listing was done over 2 decades ago. And that list doesn't change very often because in order to add to or remove, it all has to be approved by the legislature. And so that list doesn't see a lot of change. And so what's currently on the state list? Well, we have 2 endangered species, which are the Dakota skipper and the ringlet here. We also have 5 threatened species. Now, you saw of the endangered federal species, there was the Dakota skipper and the Poweshiek skipperling I mentioned earlier. Well, you see for Iowa, the Poweshiek skipperling is listed as a threatened species. And to give you an idea that the lists are old, both of those individuals are probably completely extirpated out of the state, not found anywhere, and the only way the 2 will ever get back into the state again if there's a captive release, reintroduction, conservation sort of project, would we ever see those 2 individuals back in the state. Another thing to note, all of the green ones right now, and the next slide as well, are going to be prairie species, and so individuals that need prairie habitat in order for them to survive, which at one time Iowa was covered with a lot of prairie habitat, and now I get made fun of by Illinois because we have less remnant prairie habitat left than Illinois does by percentage. So there's that. And then we have our species of concern. That's that 3rd group. Endangered, threatened, species of concern. And you'll see here there is a much longer list. I believe there's 6 individuals on this list. The green ones, again, are prairie endemic species. And then that reddish one, the zebra swallowtail, is really more of a transient species, or was. There was a small patch population. Population is doing really great down south, more around the Florida area, and every now and then we get some. However, now we're starting to see them more in Iowa. And so again, this list was created over 2 decades ago. More recently, there has been an Iowa butterfly working group that was pulled together and built a new list. Now, this isn't the official list again because that's really a process you have to go through. It's not done very often. This list here was created by the working group about a decade ago now. And you'll see here that we've broken things down into high, medium, and low as far as priorities. And the color coding here, the dark blue is the 2 species are currently listed as endangered. The dark but lighter blue is the species that are threatened. And then the lightest blue are the species that would have been listed as species of concern on the original list. You'll see a lot more things have been put in that high category, which would be more your endangered. Your threatened, that medium category, is full of things because those individuals are believed to not be doing great and really need more attention. And then your low, a couple of those species there are really more southern species. The pipevine swallowtail is one that you can find quite a bit more south. And the zebra, as I mentioned before, is also more of a southern individual. Both are found in the state. Both are found more recently, more in the state, as things are starting to extend their range and come up higher north than they would have traditionally in the past. You'll also see on this list here that even at that time, the Dakota skipper was listed as extirpated. I think when the group meets again and were to do this process over again, you would find more species put into the extirpated category at this time, because they just have not been seen in the state for a really long time. Pauschik would definitely be in that. Pauschik skipperling would definitely move to that category. So in 2016, there was a memorandum of understanding put out by the Federal Highway Administration, which actually named Interstate 35, which runs north and south through pretty much the middle of the United States, the Monarch Highway. And with that naming, there came a lot of press and a lot of information focusing on the monarchs. And it's great because it does involve Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas, which are all states really on the monarch's flyway. And it's not that the monarchs chase right down the road, they just, in general, fly there. And we can see that right here on this map. This is actually journeys north. We'll talk more about journeys north later. But what I want you to look at right now is sightings of peak migration time coming right down basically where Interstate 35 runs. And so us protecting that area, us drawing attention to that area where a lot of monarchs do migrate through, is great not only for the monarchs, but will also be great for other butterflies, other pollinators, and other insects. Because when we help protect one individual, we're protecting a lot of habitat, and that usually means we're helping the other species of insects as well. So I recently actually drove my son up to a soccer tournament in Minnesota, and on the way up, as I was driving, here was a large sign on the side of the road that said I-35 Monarch Path, which was really fun to see as I was going. I almost quickly stopped, going from 70 to nothing so that I could take a picture of the sign. I didn't. Instead, when I got back home, I jumped on Google Earth and was like, I'm going to find that sign. And so I did. And you can see in the image here, there is the white sign that has the information. It has a picture of the monarch, and it has a picture of the chrysalis painted on it as well. It was really fun to see. But what I was even more excited about was Google Earth has actually changed the name on the road. And so if you look up here, you'll see that it is actually called Monarch Highway. And as you keep zipping down the road, Monarch Highway stays with it the entire time. So it truly has Interstate 35, while most people would talk about I-35, it truly now is Monarch Highway. We should get it more into our terminology. Now, along with just a proclamation and a concerted effort to try and plant more habitat along that path, which they are, they're also looking at doing a lot of art and educational things as well. And so here's actually a great example where between Ankeny and Ames, Iowa, they will be redoing a bunch of bridges over the years, and those bridges will all have monarch patterns added to the bridge structure. So monarch wing patterns. There'll also be some that will have caterpillar patterns in them or inspired by caterpillar or monarch wing patterns as part of the design in the pieces, which will give something for people to talk about, draw awareness to Monarch Highway and what's trying to be done with the space. They're even getting pretty technical with it, and in the caterpillars that you can see going up the section in binary code in the dots of the caterpillar, they're actually going to write Monarch Highway, which pretty much everyone would need someone to explain that to them so that they could look at it to find it. However, it's really cool that they thought that far and that wide in the planning of the art that was going to be put along the road. It's, if nothing else, it'll be a cool talking point as people are driving. And then hopefully they talk about, more insects and pollinators. So I'm going to talk about insect movement. This is insects in general, butterflies in general. I'm going to try and go relatively quick, but it's an important concept that we really need to talk about because it really does push home the reason why we need more and more people getting involved and as much space as we can thinking about insects and butterflies and pollinators and how we can make Iowa better for them so that they can continue to be part of the state. So in our image here, and I had a lot of fun with AI generating all this. I used to use just blocks, just green blocks on a background. AI helped me make all this. It was really fun. I've got an island. It's got butterflies that are established in that island. You could also think about that as a habitat surrounded by non-appropriate habitats. Another way people like to show this off is they make an oasis, little area with a desert. I always like to use water. How does that translate to Iowa? Well, here is a Google Earth map looking down on Iowa. You can see Interstate 35 running right down the middle, the road we've been talking about. And to give you an idea of where in the state we're looking, Highway 20 runs north or east-west on this map. So if we look at the interchanges, the interchange intersections, there's a cloverleaf interchange and more of the standard on-off interchange. You'll see there's a lot of green in that image there. There's a lot of plants planted in there that are, hopefully nectar plants, pollinator plants, and other things helping with erosion in those spaces. Potentially there's some woodies in there as well, acting as structures for things to get out of the wind, the rain, or the sun on those really hot days as well. And so those are our islands. If we look at the rest of the map, there's a lot of that gray coloration. Those are the fields. A cornfield, a bean field. Well, don't get me wrong, we need food. We need food to feed the planet. However, for other insects, them going into those bean fields, into those cornfields, it's like them flying out over the ocean. There's no real resources for them. They'll get lost in amongst all of that, and they won't find another suitable habitat for them to establish their offspring, for their genetics to carry on potentially. And so when you look at this map, we do have some green areas. Those would be our islands. There's one in the center on what would be the east side. On the west side, there's a really nice long strip also running along the South Skunk River, creating this long corridor area. And then along some of the roadside ditches, you'll see little homes where there's green plantings there, and roadside ditches. And so we have this kind of really island sort of situation. So let's convert that back into our water here. We've got our one established habitat. It's doing well. It's got butterflies on it. We've got other potential habitat areas that are established. They would do well there, but they're not currently there. How do our butterflies get there? Well, when butterfly populations build up, some of that population will spread out. Unfortunately, sometimes even when the population isn't spread out, a portion of that population still wants to travel out. That can cause problems if the established population wasn't big enough and too much genetics leaves. And so what do we get? Well, we get some individuals that fly off in the wrong direction. They fly off into a field and they never find a habitat that's good for them again. And those individuals just end up dying. That actually happens every year when the monarchs are migrating south. There is really fun pictures of ships way out in the ocean with monarchs sitting all over the ships, all over the masts, the sails, because they've gotten lost in the ocean. And they're not going to probably find their way to a suitable location, and a bulk of them will just die. Every year, a large portion of monarchs don't make the trip down into Mexico. Things happen. Now, some of our butterflies that left the island, though, found another habitat, and enough maybe that could establish there. On the other island, I've got one where one individual made it. It made it to a great habitat, but it's by itself, and it probably won't be able to establish in that habitat. And this could happen year over year with fluctuation in and out of spaces. Now, what would be better is if we had bridges between those. And this is where roadside ditches can play a great helpful thing. They can create these corridors that insects can move through to get to another habitat. They may not be big enough or well established that they can set themselves up and sustain habitat, but they can help move habitat, move from one habitat to the next habitat for different species. And so this is something helpful, and you can see here I've got it shown that they can make it to the different ones all over a lot better, which they can then. Some may be able to establish in those spots and some may not. What we have to be careful though when we open up these roads in between these habitats is that we don't introduce something that we don't want in the rest of the habitats. So in my little imagery here, I've got a picture of a parasitic wasp that I plop down in there. And if we were to open a habitat where those parasitic wasps weren't in the other populations, but then we make that bridge in, they could affect the native population. So we have to be real careful about not introducing something that's actually going to harm our population. One thing that some individuals working in insect conservation and conservation releases pay a lot of attention to is Wolbachia. Wolbachia is a bacteria that when Wolbachia is found in a population, if it's found in the whole of the population, it doesn't really seem to do much. If it's not found in the population, it doesn't seem to do much. Butterflies thrive, they reproduce, they do great. However, if an individual with Wolbachia comes in and starts mating with individuals without Wolbachia, it can actually crash a population. You get this non-viable offspring sort of thing, and until the population then is full of all individuals with Wolbachia, your population can go way down. Or unless you can wipe Wolbachia out, which, as I believe it right now, is actually really hard to take Wolbachia out once it starts establishing in a population. And so here's an example of something that you wouldn't want to introduce into a population when you're opening up channels between habitats. What we're really, really pushing for, and what's great to go towards, though, is not bridges in between habitats, but entire habitats that are contiguous, where butterflies can move throughout and they can actually establish populations. Now, that's really hard in a lot of areas, but the larger we can make our bridges, the closer we get to this. So by planting a large section of habitat area along 35, we're creating that larger corridor that will allow insects to move through different habitats and along the run. And while that corridor is being designed and talked about and promoted for monarchs, if we make better habitat, it will be used by all of our butterflies. It'll be used by all of our pollinators. It'll be used by all insects in that space. And so the more we can push and promote these sort of programs, getting more habitat out there, the better it will be for all of our invertebrates, which then moves upstream, helps our vertebrates, our reptiles, our amphibians, helps us as well. So how are we keeping a track of butterflies? There have been some long-standing programs in the state that record population numbers. The Iowa DNR has the multi-species inventory and monitoring program that's been around for a long time. It monitors butterflies, multi-species of butterflies. It also monitors other animals, other vertebrates as well. Reiman Gardens runs a program. We've been running the Iowa Butterfly Survey Network since 2006, and we train citizen scientists to go out in the field and record butterfly populations. We'll talk a little bit more on what it does in a minute. Insectsofiowa.org is a great website. Everyone should check it out. It would allow anyone to put in a single observation of any animal, any insect, that they see. And so if you saw a black swallowtail flying in your backyard, you could hop on that website and say, on this day I saw a black swallowtail flying in my backyard, and it would be kept as a record. The more data we can collect, the better we have an understanding of what's going on in our state. And then there are plenty of other new programs that are coming online, that are starting up. Several of them may be single species, like the monarch programs that are coming online, where they're just monitoring monarchs as eggs, as caterpillars, as chrysalids, as adults. They're not taking a picture of all the species, they're just looking at this one species, and more. And we'll talk more about citizen science projects and stuff at the end. So I am going to put a bigger plug in for Insects of Iowa. It is a great resource if you want to learn your native species. They have a lot of photos on the site. It will give you date ranges of when you can see different species that have been found historically. So when would the species actually be out? Because is it a larva now and we wouldn't see the adults, but now we'll see the adults and I should be seeing it. Really great tool. If you live in Iowa, it's a site everyone should know and visit. Bug Guide. Bug Guide is a site hosted here at Iowa State University over in the Department of Entomology. Another great site if you want to learn an insect. You can actually get on here. You can post insects you've seen, where you've seen them. And this is one you can post global things, get posted to Bug Guide. Great tool with a lot of community that will help you identify your species even if you don't know what they are. So Bug Guide and insectsofiowa.org, and it's bugguide.com, I believe. And then real quick, a plug for the Iowa Butterfly Survey Network, hosted here at Reiman Gardens. We train citizen scientists to go out in the field. And what we do is we use a pollard survey method. Basically, you're given a set route on a habitat. The habitat route runs need to be at least 30 minutes, but everything is under 2 hours of time. And what you'll do is you just start on the route and you walk and you record all the butterflies you see as you are walking. And then we ask everyone that participates to go out a minimum of 6 times a year. They can go out more, and we have some surveys that go out a lot, and that really gives us a great picture every single year of how our different butterfly species are doing, so we can make some projections on numbers. We can talk about what things should be changed in different habitats. And sometimes we just have no control over things, and we just say, wow, they don't look great this year, but we know they've come down before, and we hope they'll come and have one of those boom years coming up. And so here's a great program that anyone in the state can participate in. We'll help you find a spot. And our eventual goal is to have surveyors in all 99 counties so we can truly get a picture of what's going on statewide. Now, our state data gets sent to the North American Butterfly Monitoring Network, which is a U.S. kind of larger parent organization, which then collects all the different state programs data and makes it available then to researchers around the globe that want to use the data. We participate. Several papers have been created using Iowa and other states' data, and it's helped our understanding of different species in our native habitats and around the U.S. All right, so let's talk butterfly gardening, pollinator gardening. They're very similar. It is possible to focus all of your gardening towards butterflies. However, with colony collapse, there became a lot more interest in what can we do for our pollinators. And by pollinators, most people mean honeybees. But there are other bees out there. There are other pollinators out there. So we're going to talk about all of them. You can scan this QR code here, and it will drive you to my butterfly and pollinator list. It does have native and non-native species on it. I will say that, if possible, planting native species is a great way to go. And definitely if you're working out in a large habitat, doing some sort of restoration, you should be using native plants. You should be, as much as possible, sourcing from native sources, and probably shouldn't be planting modified cultivars of the plants as well. However, native plants don't work for everyone. In urban settings, sometimes native plants just don't work great. And cultivated plants of the native plant can work really well, or sometimes a tropical plant can be your best option. If you're planting in pots, you have small gardening spaces. So native is great when you can do native. It's better if you can't get natives to work for you, or they're just not going to work as well. Then do tropicals and create habitat still. It's better than not creating any habitat at all. And so I've got 3 natives here. I've got Joe Pieweed, I've got a coneflower, and I've got a blazing star, all on these images here. Coneflower, you can get a lot of coneflowers, but some of them aren't actually native. They are cultivars. And some cultivars of coneflowers were bred to be prettier plants, and because of that, they don't actually produce any real nectars or pollens because they modified the pistil and stamen areas of the plants to make for a prettier plant. So a little understanding of plant breeding sometimes can help you make sure you choose a plant that actually does help pollinators and not one that was just made prettier but doesn't do any pollination work. Now, like I said, it's possible to use other plants, non-native plants. I've got lantana, 2 different lantanas on here. Lantana we use in the butterfly wing all the time. It is a great plant, produces lots of nectar. You can use it as an annual, and it's not going to cause problems. Now, if you were down south, especially really south, in some places, lantana is considered a weed. It just grows really well, it seeds really well. A plant that people have planted a lot over the years in Iowa, across the Midwest, and even the U.S., that now is getting some controversy behind it, is the butterfly bush. Butterfly's even in its name, but a lot of the southern states have actually now listed it as a noxious weed because it does seed itself in quite well, and is starting to spread uncontrolled. Here in Iowa, our winters are still pretty good. I have heard reports of individuals who say it's hit or miss sometimes with individuals down in the southeast part of the state, like Lee County, where they say that sometimes their butterfly bush will seed and they will get little sprouts the next year. Not to the point where I would call it a noxious weed just yet, and it really is a great long season flowering plant that produces a lot of nectar. So if you can manage it and control it, it's still a great plant. Zinnias, cheap seed to buy, you can throw a lot out, comes in different colors, sizes, does really good pollination work. And so better to plant habitat than no habitat in some cases, as long as it doesn't cause problem with native habitat outside of the areas. Now, I'm not just going to push our butterflies and what's great for them. I also want to promote the pollinators. And so these are 3 of my favorite plants for some of our bees and flies. And so alliums, hyssop, and calamint. I mean, the number of different pollinators that are drawn to these plants is impressive. And so there are 3 that I think anyone that wants something fun that'll help pollinators, these are my 3 pick. I love all of them for what they do and the diversity of things that utilize them. So it is actually possible to design your garden based on the types of plants you choose and then what insects will be drawn to it. And so all the slides I'll be showing you will have the address at the bottom, so you don't have to hurry to get it. You're going to have it for the next handful of slides as I go through some different species. And what's great is they broke down in this chart what types of pollinators you'll draw in based on the structure and properties of the flowers you choose. And so for our bees, and when I say bees, I don't just mean honeybees. I mean all the bees. Your mason bees, your orchard bees, your solitary bees. All of those individuals are great pollinators. And even though they might not all be great agriculture pollinators, a lot of those other individuals, bumblebees, do agricultural pollination work. The mason bees will do agricultural pollination work. Not quite as much as honeybees are known to do, but they still do some of that and other pollination work. So for our bees, they like the light colors, the whites, the yellows, and they will go to UV pattern. So there are certain plants that have UV patterns that we can't see, especially daytime. But if you were to go out and look at some of your flowers at night with a blacklight flashlight in hand, you'll actually see things like runway strips or bullseye patterns on the flowers telling things like our bees that, hey, your nectar reward is right here in the middle. Your pollen reward is right here in the middle. Come right here. And so bees will be looking for that UV pattern on the flowers. Odor, mild, pleasant, fresh, those are things that your bees like. and they're going and looking for pollen, and they're looking for nectar. Those are things they like. Our moths, if they are moths that do feed, and we're going to talk later about 3 species that don't feed as adults, but for your moths that do feed, that do have a proboscis, they're looking for something that's more flute-shaped. They don't care a lot about bright colors because a lot of them do their flying late in the day, at night, and they're trying to find, so they need more things like a really fragrant scent to draw them in to that. They're coming for the nectar. They don't care about pollen. Our butterflies also primarily coming for the nectar. That's why they visit the flowers, is for the nectar reward. They don't need a lot of the pollen. They will go to brighter flowers there. And again, they want a fluted flower. Now put that proboscis down in, drink that nectar out. Now outside of our butterflies and our bees, our beetles actually do pollination work. Now, flower-wise, they're not looking for cupped or fluted. They want more dinner plate sort of thing. Big open flowers, lots of pollen. A lot of times they're coming to eat the pollen. And when they're eating the pollen, they're getting the pollen all over themselves. You think of your dog out in the yard just rolling around in the grass. It's kind of what I always envision with the beetles. They're getting that pollen all over their body. They're eating some pollen. And then when they go to the next flower, the pollen falls off their body. They're not effective pollinators. However, they do some pollination work. And then a group that's highly underappreciated, highly overlooked for the pollination, I would say, even more than the beetles, is the flies. And flies actually do pretty good pollination work. There are so many flies out there flying around that they visit a lot of flowers. They're not a messy pollinator. The pollen gets on their body, they go to the next flower, and the pollen gets put onto the new flower. They're not eating the pollen. They're coming for the nectar. They don't need bright flowers, and my favorite part of this whole piece for the flies is a lot of them tend to like putrid smelling flowers. That's what's really drawing them in, is that putrid smell, as if there's a carcass that they could be laying their eggs on as well. And so they make for a really fun pollinator that, again, gets overlooked a lot. But again, there are a lot of flies outside, right? So let's talk about our monarchs. We're talking about monarch highway, planting things. Monarch, again, is that recognized species. I've got a female and male up here. If you're not familiar with sexing them, the female's the bigger picture, the dark bands for the venation, where the male has the thinner. Also, when you look at the male on the hind wing, you're going to see those 2 dots. Those are pheromone pads, and so that's what you're looking for to identify it's a male. Unless you have the male and female, that you can look at how thick the dark lines are with the veins. It's easier just to look for those 2 dark spots on the inside hind wing of the males. Some interesting things are going to happen real soon with the monarchs. The monarchs have been put up for listing. Fish and Wildlife has been reviewing if the monarch is going to be listed as a listed species. Like we talked about, threatened, endangered, species of concern. We don't know where it might fall. The ruling has been pushed back until December now, and unless it gets pushed again, a ruling will be made. If they are listed, it will change Americans' interaction with the monarchs. Right now, a lot of people love to tag monarchs in the fall. They like to raise monarch caterpillars to release in the wild with, just as adults, with youth as an education thing in the classroom. They like to bring monarchs and use them for celebratory releases or observe them in different settings. If they become listed, there is a good chance that no one will be able to capture, touch, even stalk, follow around, take pictures of monarch butterflies anymore. The monarch is currently state listed in California. It is illegal to capture or touch a monarch or the caterpillar or any of its life stages in the state without a research permit. And so it will be really interesting to see what happens as we get into December if they become a listed species in the United States. With that comes potential for other research and conservation things, but for a species that is so well loved and so ingrained in people's psyche because they have handled, they've touched, they've observed, chased, marked, raised, it'll be a change. So we'll see what comes of this. But if we want monarchs, we need their host plant. And so host plant for monarchs is milkweed. Now there are different milkweeds and they'll use different milkweeds at different rates. Iowa's home to about 18 different species of milkweeds. Of that 18 though, 5 are considered endangered or threatened plants, and so you don't see those very much, and 5 are the common ones. Those would be like your common milkweed, your swamp milkweed, tuberosa would be 3 of the big ones. Now on this picture I've got for you all, also the orange and red one there is tropical milkweed. Tropical milkweed's one that is not native. There is some research that suggests that if monarchs interact with the tropical milkweed through their caterpillar, through their adult stage, nectaring off of it, that it can actually mess with the butterflies, and then they think, oh, I've already made it down south, here is this southern plant, I'm not going to migrate when migrate time comes along. And so it isn't one that's being recommended for Midwest plantings. You still can. You can still get it. You can still plant it. Works great. Butterflies rear on it really well. Grows well from seed. But it is something that people should start thinking about, maybe using some of the different milkweed plants. Now, when we go to plant milkweed for our monarchs, because we want to protect our monarchs, you should not take a habitat or an area and just strip it clean and plant only milkweed. It is not the way to go. That is not a good habitat for the monarchs. Yes, it's got a lot of resource in it, but that can cause other pathogen or disease problems only having that monoculture of milkweeds. And so really you need the other forbs, you need the other grasses, and to an extent you need woodies off to a side potentially as well. And where this becomes important is the woody plants, while they're not supporting the monarchs in their feeding or their nectaring most likely, they provide structural plants for when we have really hot days they can get out of the shade. We have those windy Iowa days, windy Midwest days, that gives them structure they can go to. And we have our storms that roll through with all the rain. Those trees provide that support and structure. When they're migrating south, you'll find them roosting in trees, in mass. Gives them that structure to support them on their journey. So our woodies are important as well, but creating habitat sometimes, they need to be pushed off to the sides, put in clusters in an area, and then woodies, that are growing up in that would change that habitat do need to be removed because our prairies need to stay open if we want to keep them prairie. So there's a time and place and an amount for a lot of different things. Now, one woody that I like to promote, especially in your urban settings, if you want to really help monarchs as they're coming through, is the seven sunflower, which is a shrub. Although, I'll tell you, it gets pretty big. And the one we had here at the gardens, I would have called a small tree until it just got so big during a storm it fell down. A lot of our plants late in the fall will senesce back earlier than the monarchs coming through. And those monarchs coming through are looking for that last little bit of nectar to help them make the rest of that trip. And the seven sunflower is one of those really late flowering things that not only helps the monarchs as they're migrating through, but those last of the bees that are flying around, the flies, the wasp, that are looking for that last fall feeding. This is a great plant to help them survive late in the season, especially when we have a really dry fall, really warm, dry fall. This one tends to do really well. And again, I'm pushing the other things. So grasses. Here are 3 skipper species. These are 3 grass-feeding species that feed on native grasses. Skippers as a whole have seen a lot of decline in the last couple of decades. We're not sure what has been the leading factor that has caused the species that feeds on grasses to just disappear in habitats that are still full of grasses. Several species have declined, and so the more we can encourage, promote, have, and a lot of your turf grasses aren't the right grasses for them, so more lawn isn't the way to go. You need more of the weedy grasses, those native grasses that most people try to take out of their yards to help these butterfly populations sustain, thrive in the state as we go into the future. So let's talk about our moths too. Butterflies get all the credit, but there are a lot more moths in the state than there are butterflies. We talked earlier about there being about 110 butterfly species found. Pretty much anywhere you go, whatever your butterfly number is, you can take that times 10 or more, and that's how many moth species you'll find in that same general area. The number in Iowa, last I saw, was much more, I believe, than the 10 times sort of thing, number of moths than butterflies in the state. Now, with these here, I also have the trees that they feed on. This is not their extensive list. It's just kind of their core 4 that each of them feed on. But Cecropia is in the middle there. Luna is our yellow one, and Polyphemus is our yellow-green one, and Polyphemus is our tan one up there. These are what are considered probably Iowa's 3 largest moths. None of these individuals feed as adults. They have non-functioning mouth parts, which is a really cool thing about the adults. So the time that you'll get a chance to see these in the state as adults is a very small, finite window. Males tend to come out a couple of days before the females start coming out. The females release their pheromone. The males get drawn in. They mate. Females go off, lay their eggs. As soon as they've laid a bulk of their eggs, they tend to die shortly after that. So for the males and females both, we're looking at under 2-week lifespan. In most cases, we're looking at 5 to 7-ish days if the weather is appropriate and they can find a mate. It goes pretty quick, but these are great individuals when you get a chance to see them in the wild in the state. And their caterpillars are wild, and they're fun to raise on these host plants and more. So let's talk about some programs that people can get involved with to help our understanding of insects, to help grow what we have going and what's out in the state. Here's a new-ish one. This is iNaturalist. It's been around a while, but it's newer. Basically, you can go on this site, you can take a picture of an insect, you can post that picture of an insect, you may know what it is, you may not know what it is, and they will save that record. And you can see other things people have posted in your area. Also, big BioBlitzes will use this as their kind of their portal for information. You can join programs that are in an area or globally, whatever. So it's an easy one to get involved with. There's an app for your phone, really simple and easy. Monarch Joint Ventures does a lot of monarch-specific stuff. They've got monarch surveying across caterpillars and eggs and adults and protocols and planting and habitat and lots of different things you can get involved with there. Again, covering just specifically monarchs and only monarchs, which then doesn't give you the picture of how the other things are doing in the state. Journeys North is a fun, easy one. It's been around quite a while, actually. You can go on their page, and when you see the monarchs flying south in large clusters, you can just post. They track a lot of migratory things. You can track monarchs going up and down. You can track a lot of the birds going up and down. It's just for sighting. It's a really easy site to get engaged with. Super simple. You just post, I've seen it. You don't have to have pictures. And then you get a little dot in a map. And there's fun little videos you can watch of the season as things grow and change as far as things spreading out. So nice site. Here's one of their maps right here, where you can see the points, and then the colored dots tells you when things hit at different locations, so you can see the trends. This one's specific to monarchs and painted ladies, American ladies. This is an Iowa State program, and this is a migratory species too. These individuals fly south more into the Texas area, less into the Mexico area, but they have to repopulate every year as well. Our American ladies, our painted ladies, our red admirals. And so this site is one where you can participate in tracking those migratory species as well. eButterfly is a Canadian site, but they'll take U.S. records these days. They've expanded. They track butterflies. Any butterfly sighting you see, you can post to the site, and the data gets used by researchers just like it does on many of the others. Now, getting out of the butterflies, there are a lot of citizen science programs. If there is a species you have interest in, a genera of insects you have interest in, you can probably find a program you can get involved with. Bee Spotter is one for our bees, and by bees they're doing bumblebees. Lost Ladybug is a really great, fun one. This is a great one for kids too. Go out and find the ladybug, take a picture. They have really great guides that help you ID. You can share the pictures you see, the records, and these sorts of things get use. And if you're thinking, I see ladybugs all the time. Well, you may see a species of ladybug, but there are lots of species, and there are some species of ladybugs that are really in trouble, and we don't know how their populations are doing unless someone's taking records. And here's a great way, because there's not enough research scientists doing this sort of work. Citizen scientists can really help out, get us a better understanding of our insects across the U.S. Again, for dragonflies, the Migratory Dragonfly Partnership. Here's one. This one works similar-ish to something like the Iowa Butterfly Survey Network. You have your site that you would go survey, you'd go out on a regular basis, and you would identify what species of dragonflies you see on multiple occasions over the season. Because some species are found early, some are found late, some are found throughout. And so you really need to be out at different times, because flight periods for these things varies, and you won't get a full picture of how all species are doing or how all things are doing unless you're out multiple times throughout the season. Now, one more that I'll push, but I don't have a slide for it. If you are going to plant your garden, the Blank Park Zoo has the Plant Grow Fly program, which what they're trying to do is get people to plant butterfly gardenings. And all you need to be labeled as a Plant Grow Fly garden is one host plant in your garden and one nectar plant in your garden, and you can send it in to them, and it's just plantgrowfly.com, and or it's on the Blank Park Zoo webpage. And they will put a dot on the map, and if you want, you can even get a sign for your garden saying this is a Plant Grow Fly garden. Signs for pollinator and butterfly gardens became very popular, and I used to joke all the time that it was a lot easier to get gardening signs to say that you had a pollinator garden that you could put out than some people sometimes have plants in their garden, because each program was creating their own sign. They're great. They draw awareness, start conversations, but none of those signs give those gardens any sort of protection. So if you think, oh, that's a monarch way station, it's protected. It's not protected. It's just a sign. And it could be sprayed, and that's unfortunate. It could be mowed, and that's unfortunate, and other things. It doesn't give them protection. It just draws awareness. Now, some quick things about Reiman Gardens. Reiman Gardens is home of the Christina Reiman butterfly wing. In your image there, if you didn't know, it's designed to look like a giant butterfly in flight. We fill it with butterflies from around the world in the space where you can come and watch them fly in an enclosed space. It's really pretty magical, if I don't say so myself. If you want to get more involved in Iowa in the conversation of our native species and learn more, we actually host a program each year called Day of Insects. We bring in 15 speakers. We talk about insect and other invertebrates. And we cover everything from butterflies to beetles to dragonflies to praying mantises, and getting out of the insects to snails and isopods, and really we cover a lot of invertebrate topics. But 15 speakers, a day of conversation. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of people from all over the Midwest, and we've even had Texas and California participate, come in. And there's a virtual option since COVID. So really anyone can participate. So look for that. March 29th, you can find more information on the Reiman Gardens webpage as well. Now, I need to make one quick plug for another Iowa native butterfly, because we talked a lot about monarchs and lightly on some of the other ones. Did you know that Iowa is one of very small number of states that does not have an official state insect symbol? Now, we have a bird, a rock, a flower, a nickname, a tree, a song, but we do not have an official state butterfly or insect. And technically, Iowa has the least official state symbols of any of the 50 states. So we don't have a fish, and they've tried. We don't have several other things. They all have gone to the wayside. And so on this slide here, 48 states have an official state insect or butterfly, and some have both, and some even have what they call an agricultural insect. Iowa and Michigan are the last two to have an official state symbol. Some symbols I feel are overused. The honeybee, which is not even native to the United States, is 17 states' symbol in one way or another, state insect or state agricultural insect. The monarch is 7 states. We can totally pick something different. The ladybug, 6 states. The tiger swallowtail, 5, which is pretty impressive. 19 states have an official state butterfly, and 13 have an official state butterfly and an official state insect. I just want us to have one. We don't have to have 2. We can just have one for starters. I think our choice should be the Regal fritillaria, which the butterfly had shown there earlier. Here is the Regal fritillaria's historic range. The range right now is actually shrunk down quite a bit. You can find them a little bit in Indiana, definitely in Illinois, but the eastern population is completely gone, basically. There's a small population on a couple of military bases way out east, but short of that, they're really found more in the Midwest, putting Iowa really in the middle of their range. And they're these cute little bitty caterpillars. They have this great life history. In the fall, the females lay their eggs in tall grass prairie, where the plant will be in the spring. So the prairie violet and bird's foot violet these individuals will use has senesced back down and basically died to the ground, just the roots. Chemical volatiles being released where they died off. Females fly along, dive into that tall grass prairie, crawl to the ground, lay an egg. Late fall, early winter, that egg will hatch. That caterpillar will eat the egg, nothing else. It'll overwinter covered in the leaf litter in the tall grass prairie. And it'll wait till spring when the prairie violet and the bird's foot violet finally grow back up again, when it'll start eating. It'll go through 6 molts, which is unusual because most things do 5 molts before it pupates in early spring. And then the males and females will be off flying around. They'll mate. The males will die off. The females will go into a summer diapause where they're just hanging out, kind of hiding themselves during the heat of the summer. In the fall, they will go and lay the eggs, and the process will start all over again. I think this would be a great candidate for a Iowa official state butterfly. And with that, and all the fun things I threw out at you today, I will now open the virtual floor up for questions. And so I will be with you real time, virtually, answering your questions. So thanks for having me today, and listen to me talk to you about a lot of our native butterflies, insects, and pollinators. Have a good day.